So hi everyone again. Just waiting for the last few people to join. So thanks for your attendance today for this first VVB training session. My name is Richard Iliff. So I work as Standards Manager for SustainCert, and I'll be delivering your presentation today. So just moving the slide on. So yeah, as an introduction, so bit of housekeeping. So we've only got 30 minutes today. That was a sort of communication problem our side, so it means we'll likely overrun. Hopefully we won't get cut off. General procedures, so if you do have any questions that come up, if you could do that in your chat box. The purpose for this is so that all questions can be recorded and a transcript can be provided to everyone who's attended. We want to make sure if we answer your questions, we answer them with due consideration. Yeah, so that's the general housekeeping. In terms of what we're going to cover today, so I'd just like to start and set the scene by talking about how we'd like to improve these training sessions and the overall VVB communication system. So we'll spend some time talking about that, and then we'll go into detail on the most recent rule up-to-dates and clarifications that we'll cover for this quarter. So talking about the improvements that we have planned, so it's going to be in a sort of stepwise approach. So from 1 to 4, you know, 1, I've highlighted that in bold because this is hopefully something that you would have already seen some results on. In terms of better visibility of rule updates and clarifications. I'll talk about this on the next slide, but that's really the first step in a journey of improving this. So the next part will be to better coincide with rule updates and clarifications. So generally these are released by Gold Standard quarterly, and we'd like to time this training to match pretty much when they are released. So those of you who are observant will notice that today's training is covering rules updates and clarifications that were released a couple of months back. So we're going to be improving on that one. Then, you know, more medium-term goals are to start offering training on areas requested by VVBs. So not just limit it to talking about rule updates and just providing clarifications. You know, as I mentioned in the email that went out to communicate about this session, we want to train on things that you find relevant, and in time for our next training session, which will be in June, we'll have some system of recording you know, those areas that you would like to see training on. It'll likely be you know, an email address or something like that. So we will get that system set up, and I will follow that up after this presentation. And then an additional aim would be to train on areas that we observe are not well understood. So, you know, we'll see as we are making certification decisions, you know, if there are, you know, certain areas that keep coming through as being not well understood, we want to communicate that to you as a community. So talking about the better visibility, so this the sort of innovation that we supplied there was the rule updates and clarification page. So I will show you it very shortly, but just to touch on briefly what those two categories are. So rule updates, so these are generally changes to the standard documents, and these are on the whole have been approved by the Gold Standard Technical Advisory Committee, so they're fairly substantial updates to rules. The second clarification, the second category rather, is a clarification. So this is more when a published rule in the standard isn't clear or may have different interpretations. So it's not really anything that needs to be changed, it's just we need to add a bit of clarity. So what is common to both of these types of rule communications is that they will be incorporated into the next version of the standard. So anything you would see on this page will become part of the rules at the next planned update, which many of you may be aware is due September of this year. So I'll just show you the page in case you are not familiar. So this is how it's structured. So we have rule updates coming first, and all of the different rule updates are sorted by category. Then we have rule clarifications as something that's separate. So what we've tried to do with this version is allow people to better search for things. So there's a search box, and also a sort of key innovation, really, if I can just go back here, is whenever there is a rule update or a clarification, the documents that it affects are referenced. So it's very clear what we're referring to. One of the areas we've tried to improve visibility is to offer people the chance to sign up to rule updates. Previously, rule updates were published in the quarterly newsletter, which may have meant that it was hard to find information. So now you can actually sign up for updates as and when page is changed. So I just had a chat with our communications before this call, and so we have 18 people signed up to this. So we'd very much encourage more people to sign up to this and become up to date. So there's the address of the gold standard documents for those who need it. So just talking about a slightly new approach. So we're trying to, in general, improve the whole system, and so this means that we're looking at different ways of doing things. One of the things that you may start seeing is our certification team will start asking VVBs to respond more directly to any queries that are raised during design and performance reviews. So those of you who work for under the UNFCCC system, so you will be aware that that's how CDM run things. We will adopt a similar approach. A couple of reasons for this. So if VVBs have approved something, we believe they should be prepared to defend or represent it. Importantly, VVBs are independent. So if we ask project developers to respond to any queries, there's obviously a vested interest. So we believe in asking someone who's independent will lead to a better outcome. And the third reason, I guess, as well, is that if we are communicating with VVBs more directly, they will become more aware of the types of issues that are being flagged at our end. So when we finally come to a certification decision. Along with this, at the same time, we'll be implementing an improved performance management system. So we do currently just keep tabs on how things are working. What we will do in future is to make this more granular and to focus on particular issues that are really material to project decisions. So, for example, things like additionality or project databases in distributed technology projects. So these types of things need to be correct, and so we're going to be just focusing on checking those and making sure we feed back whenever issues in these key areas come through to our side. We will share this information as and when we implement it, so that the expectation from our side is very clear. And one of the areas that we would like to look at in the future is to implement mechanisms to incentivize good performance. So, offering benefits to those VVBs who consistently perform well. So things like if we have tenders where we would include a list of good VVBs, then those people who perform well would be, we'd like to sort of partner up and join forces with them, and potentially publication of performance results as well. But this is very much in the long term. So yeah, so just to keep an eye out for these changes as we start rolling them out in the coming months. So now to get into a bit of detail on the most recent rule updates. So they were published a few months back in October. So hopefully people are aware of them. I will try and go through this process relatively quickly and just talk about each of the rule updates and just offer a bit of context as well as just reading out the implications for VVBs. So the first of which is an extended retroactivity eligibility timeline for particular projects only. So you will all be aware that retroactive project submissions are allowed under GS4GG, but there is a time limit in that projects must submit for preliminary review within 1 year of the start date, as per the relevant definition of start date. So the rule update that we have to talk about here is that there are 2 exceptions. So any project that falls under the land use and forestry requirements, this 1 year date does not apply. It's actually 5 years. And projects applying the retrofit energy efficiency measures in shipping methodology, instead of 1 year, it's 2 years. And the reason for different rules for these 2 project types is the complexity in monitoring and project development for these 2 project types. Since we're talking about shipping, so just to bring to your attention as well that a methodology is on hold. So reducing vessel emissions through the use of advanced hull coatings, version 2. So this methodology is on hold. The reason for this is that a wide range of energy efficiency approaches, including advanced hull coatings, is actually covered in a later methodology. It has different requirements and approaches, though it's very similar. But because of the fact that there are sort of 2 slightly different systems, the older of the 2 and the less widely applicable of the 2, the advanced hull coatings, is put on hold. So no new projects can be submitted for listing until further notice. And the grace period that was published on our rule update page has now elapsed. So registration and renewals are closed. So the next update to talk about is it's a fairly sort of large topic, this one. So gold standard CDM projects are now eligible for the gold standard renewable energy label. So just to put a bit of context on that, so the gold standard renewable energy label is we designed it as a quality label for renewable energy certificates. So much in the same way as the gold standard label for certified emission reduction projects, the gold standard part certifies a sustainable development contribution, adequate project safeguards, and ongoing stakeholder consultations, of which I'm sure you'll all be familiar. So we wanted to bring that offering to renewable energy certificates as well. There are many different types of renewable energy certificate, and currently we only partner with IREX. So to talk in a bit more detail, so the reason that we didn't originally allow GS-CDM projects to be eligible for this label was that the CDM do not prevent issuance of IREX and CERs from the same megawatt hour. If we take IREX as an example, so IREX, they have a requirement that anyone using the IREX system should declare if carbon credits may be issued from the same megawatt hour, but they don't actually put in place a tracking system. And the CDM, it's similar. sort of situation. So it is in theory possible. Well, it is possible to issue both a CER and an IREC from the same megawatt hour. A key requirement of our gold standard label is that this shouldn't be possible, and the reason for this is to preserve the environmental integrity, such that, you know, if people are paying for an environmental outcome, it's not sort of split between different people who own it. So it's quite complicated to prevent this happening on a system for which we don't control the issuance of. And that is CDM credits. So our approach to this is to put in place a legal safeguard, a series of pre and post issuance checks, and a set of stiff penalties if anyone actually tries to attempt the double issuance. Fairly sure that people won't, but it's necessary that we put this in place. So the good news is that GS-CDM projects are now eligible. But in order to do so, project developers must make a declaration that they will not issue both CERs and renewable energy certificates from the same megawatt hour from any project that is registered with gold standard. There's the flexibility to choose whether you issue CERs or megawatt hours within the same project, but you mustn't do it from the same megawatt hour to avoid the double counting. So in terms of tracking, the monitoring plan must include a way of tracking of issuance of each type of product. And this is already within the rules, but we just clarified it so that it's very clear what people need to do. And this will be part of the monitoring plan and the monitoring report. So VVBs are expected to check that this is in place. In terms of policing this, issuance of both schemes will be tracked by gold standard and IREX, and obviously VVBs will play their part in the project level. Penalties, not especially relevant for VVBs, but you know, just put them on screen so that you can be aware that they are quite severe. So you know, hopefully they won't ever come into play. Now, moving swiftly on to clarifications. So there's only a few here. So just to touch briefly on the conformity buffer for land use and forestry projects. So this is the buffer for 20% of the issuances withheld in the event of forest fires, unplanned clearances, or sort of any issues that might be unexpected in the project. So it's a clarification in language, really. So rules state that project developers can transfer credits from other gold standard certified projects. What the clarification actually says is it needs to be issued gold standard VERs. So credits must be issued VERs and not PERs or CERs for that fact. So there's also a clarification on planned emission reductions. So yeah, validated CO2 certificates, the new name for. So the text in the rules says that issuances of PERs can be for 5 years after project design certification, or indeed a subsequent performance certification. It's a different timeline for agriculture projects. So that's 3 years rather than the 5. Just to clarify that there is a requirement that in the first cycle of PERs, the PERs must be successfully converted to GSVERs. So those planned emission reductions need to be fully converted as verified as having happened. And so in the event of any shortfall, project developers should get in touch with gold standard. It's not really a VVB issue, but we just want to make aware that there is a requirement that PERs need to be converted in previous cycles to GSVERs to allow the flexibility of PER issuances in future. A clarification on erroneous inclusions. So this is the final clarification. So obviously, an erroneous inclusion is a non-conformity in eligibility. It's specific to the POAs, typically identified by either VVB or Gold Standard Sustained Cert. So just to clarify that there are two types of erroneous inclusions, and they each have different procedures. So the most simplest to deal with is a non-systemic issue, and so this is one that occurs in one activity that, due to its particular circumstances, it doesn't apply to any others in the POA. So let's imagine an issue that is perhaps technology specific, and there's only one of these technology VPAs in the POA. It wouldn't then make sense for other different technologies that were not affected by this issue to have any sort of impediment from going forward. So if something is formally declared as a non-systemic issue, all the other activities that are not affected can proceed to performance certification as usual. So for those issues that are systemic, so this is when a non-conformity is identified in one activity that may reasonably be present in others. So you can imagine this scenario in sort of sampled BPAs, and if a systemic issue is identified, it means that any others that have a reasonable probability of this occurring in their VPA, all such activities need to be put on hold until the issue is resolved. And so there is a procedure in principles and requirements that talks about how to deal with the non-conformity issue. So yeah. So that's it. So there is a very sort of quick run through of the rule updates, and also hopefully a good sort of introduction as to how we're the direction of travel for this training, and in general the sort of VVB Sustained Cert Gold Standard interface in future. So at this point, would be very happy to answer any questions. I'm just taking a look to see if anyone has raised hands. So we have a question from Srikanth. So can you share an example for non-systematic and systematic erroneous inclusions? So yeah, so I shared an example for non-systemic. So I think it's slightly easier to explain a non-systemic issue, because in general, I think with the nature of POAs, most things may actually turn out as being systemic. So non-systemic issue would be something that, due to the particular circumstances, there really is no chance of it affecting anything else in the POA. So let's maybe take a multi-technology POA. If there's an issue affecting only cook stoves, and the POA has water VPAs, has solar VPAs, then obviously the water and solar VPAs are not, you would think they're not going to be affected by an issue that is very particular to cook stoves. So yeah, in terms of an example for a systemic issue, it's sort of a bit harder to come up with that, because as I say, I think the majority will be things that will likely affect other VPAs or CPAs in a POA. So yeah, so I have a question from Scott. So will a recording be available of this? The answer to this one is yes. So we will publish this recording. The session's being recorded, so it will be available on the Gold Standard YouTube site. And as I mentioned at the start, so any questions that that people have, there will be a transcript of those. So yeah, so seems to be no further questions, or just give perhaps 10-15 seconds. So we're just waiting for that to come through. So we'll reach out after this call and send a follow-up email to those of you who have attended, just giving you a link of where the recording will be available. And I'll also provide some details of how VVBs can get involved in sort of defining some of the perhaps training that is offered from these quarterly webinar series. So no further questions. So I'd just like to thank everyone for your time today. Thank you very much, and just look out for an email from us in the next few days. Thanks a lot.